That question one more time. I got lost in the shuffle here.
How can there be transitions from plants to animals and increasing complexities in other species with no living species that is a transition alive, specifically ape to human?
How can there be no living species transition, specifically apes to humans? I think if you get the book we called Bones of Contention by Marvin Lubenow, who spent 25 years studying all of the so-called cavemen, you would find that every one that has been used as evidence has been disproven. You mentioned Australopithecus afarensis, better known as Lucy. Charles Oxnard studied Lucy, did a computer multivariate analysis of all the bones, spent 16 years studying Lucy, and he's the most knowledgeable expert in the world, and he believes in evolution. But he said, folks, Lucy is just an unusual chimpanzee. It is not a missing link. So you need to study Oxnard's work on that before you tell your students we have evidence that Lucy is a missing link. And we've got a whole series. The book out there is the best one by Marvin Lubenow. Every one that's been used as evidence for humans, for evolution of humans, has been disproven. There is no evidence that any animal has ever produced a different kind of animal. You can believe that if you want, but that's not science. That's the whole point of this discussion tonight.
If one is willing to trust science to light this room, when we go to the doctor, when we drive our cars and eat our food, why can't you trust the same science that tells us we evolve?
If one can trust science to go to the doctor and drive our cars, why can't I trust the same science that tells us we evolved? I'd sure like to know what anything evolution has done for the advancement of science. All of the major branches of science were started by creationists. And the evolution theory has nothing to do with any of those things you mentioned. I mean, I understand electricity. I've built many buildings and done a lot of it. My dad was an electrical engineer. I understand how it has nothing to do with evolution. Neither does driving a car. I've done about everything you can do to a car. I've rebuilt everything, and evolution has nothing to do with that. I think science deals, the whole problem is, the question assumes that evolution should be part of science. That's where the problem comes in. That's my whole point. Evolution, at least above the variations within the kind, it doesn't happen. It doesn't belong in science class. It shouldn't be there. So evolution has nothing to do with science, and the poor students are being duped into all this, and everybody else is having to pay for it.
The claim that evolution didn't do anything for mankind is pretty interesting. One of the reasons we have some cures that are fairly effective against certain diseases, such as cancer and hopefully to some extent HIV, is because of our understanding of evolutionary processes. You know how cures against very little diseases like those work? They work by, one of the most effective ways to do it is by bombarding the agent, the virus or the bacterium, with multiple antibiotics. You know why we bombard them with multiple antibiotics instead of only one? Because scientists understand evolution, and they know that if you bombard something with one antibiotic, the thing that you're going to do is to select by natural selection for a very resistant strain of that thing. And so yes, you're going to solve the problem right now, but then it's going to bite you right back in the next few generations. On the other hand, they also know, because they understand evolution, that if you hit something with triple hits or quadruple hits, that thing cannot produce a single mutation that will cope with all of those four things simultaneously. That is why an understanding of evolution is not only crucial for an understanding of science in general, but it's actually helping people to try to figure out solutions to problems such as diseases like cancer and HIV.
Why do Occam's statements substantiate a legitimate objection to the idea of intelligent design?
Say that again? Who's?
Occam's theorem.
Oh, Occam's.
Why is that a legitimate objection to the idea of intelligent design?
Because intelligent design is one of those things that Occam will call an unnecessary hypothesis. In other words, if you can explain something with natural means and natural laws, then you don't need a supernatural intervention. Now, as I said before, I think, several times, the fact that you don't need a supernatural intervention doesn't mean that there is no supernatural thing at all. That's outside of what we're talking about. It only means that it is an additional hypothesis that is not needed in order to understand how things actually work. Science as a process, not just biology, evolution, biology, it works that way. Successful scientific theories over and over have been theories that have been within the limits of Occam's razor, that is, that have made the fewest number of unnecessary hypotheses. This is, by the way, not to say, people sometimes mistake this for saying, well, then the simpler hypothesis is the one that wins, and God did it is the simplest hypothesis you can come up with. That's not the way it works. The way it works is for unnecessary hypothesis that doesn't have anything to do with simplicity or complexity. An hypothesis can be very complex if the thing that you have to explain is very complex. And evolution is a very complex hypothesis because it relies on a variety of different statements.
Good point. Occam's razor, he says that you don't need the supernatural because it can be explained naturalistically. Evolution has never explained in detail how anything has evolved. They make up all these wild stories of how they think it might have happened. You need to read Michael Behe's book called Darwin's Black Box if you want to see the real complexity of things. I understand how cars work. They're made from 100% natural products. There's nothing supernatural about a car. But obviously there was a designer. If I told you that a Corvette evolved from an explosion in a junkyard, you would think I was crazy. If I told you that lightning strikes and hurricane strikes, even Hoyle, who said, you know, a tornado going through a junkyard will not assemble a Boeing 747. Even though a Boeing 747 is made of all natural parts, it still has to have a designer. I was in Japan a couple of weeks ago, but I did not see the guy who designed the Casio Databank watch. Whether I see the designer or not doesn't matter. This had a designer. And whether you believe in God or not doesn't matter. This universe was designed, and you will answer to him someday real soon.
We have time for one more question here. Today we are listening to a debate on two theories of creation. Why is this discussion not occurring in the public school systems of America?
I answer first on that one?
Yes, you do.
Why is this discussion on creation evolution not occurring in public schools? Man, I wish it was. I speak in hundreds of public schools. And I think students ought to see both sides. And I'm thrilled that UT would invite, you know, this to happen here. They ought to also invite creation speakers to come speak in every evolutionary biology class. Give them some equal time. There's never been a law against teaching creation in the public schools. Any teacher tomorrow or whenever, Monday, can teach creation if they want. Two states passed laws requiring teachers to teach creation, and those laws were struck down only because the states required that creation be taught. The court clearly said, you can teach creation if you want, but you cannot require the teachers to teach it. That's what the argument was about. Anybody can teach creation, or the Bible, in a public school, for that matter. There's no law against that. There never has been. I think evolutionists don't want creation brought in side by side, because then their theory starts to look pretty silly next to the creation theory. I think that it's a no competition type of thing. They don't want any competition for their theory.
Actually, I happen to disagree with most of my colleagues. I think that creation should be discussed in public school. It shouldn't be taught as an alternative scientific theory because it is not, but it should be discussed because so many people believe it, and there is a good reason for why people believe it. There is an enormous social movement about it. Therefore, you need to take into account